your dreams.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another Snowbreak video, and today I'm just going to be doing a quick tier list. That's it. If you haven't liked the content, leave a like and subscribe. So I've been meaning to do a tier list video for quite some time, but I kind of just forgot to do it, and so now I'm just going to be doing it now. I probably won't do another one till, I don't know, maybe in the fall, since we don't really get that many characters that often and patches are kind of slow. So I will be going over a tier list from this website, specifically from snowbreakgg.com. I will have a link to this website somewhere so you can have a better look and read it through it yourself. I just happen to have this tier list on basically like this because I do find this visually appealing than whatever's going on over here, just words. They do have like a detailed explanation on why they put this character on the tier list, and I'm basically going to be summarizing what they put, and then by the end of the video I'll probably go over the changes that I would make. I mean, it's a pretty good tier list, but I'll make some small changes. I'm basically going to be breaking it down through each tier. When I make a tier list, I like to have S, A, B, C, D, E, or E, there's no E, F. I like to have that instead of what they have. They basically have tier 0 through 4. Just think of this as S, A, B, C, D, F. Basically same shit. So here we go. So the first S tier character I'm going to be talking about is Yao. Yao is a single target DPS character. She's one of the best DP characters in the game since the very start of the game. Her DPS is highly dependent on the Space Cowboy, a 5-star weapon, but even without it, she can deal some crazy amounts of damage. She's a beast in neural simulation since she's better at single target, and you're basically fighting a boss in that game mode, so she's basically a beast in that game mode. Her ultimate deals a lot of damage, but it does cost 100, and to me it kind of just feels janky at times. Maybe it's a skill issue, but either way, I have cleared content without her ultimate, so it's not that big of a deal, but you know, she deals a lot of damage. That's basically all she does. Next character on S tier, we got Acacia, one of the best supports in the game. I would arguably say that she is a must pull. Her support skill can reduce enemies' elemental resistances. Her support and her ultimate is also very good at crowd controlling. Her standard skill can summon up to 3 darts that will orbit around her and can also freeze enemies. So she can also be basically used anywhere since she can reduce enemies' elemental resistances. And for Neuronics, you can definitely invest in all 3. I would probably start with her support skill and then her ultimate and then standard, but arguably very versatile everywhere. Definitely a good character. Definitely a good pickup. Chenxing Ethereal Cloud is another DPS character with a good form of mobbing from her standard skill. She can deal a shocking amount of ballistic damage, and she's also very useful against bosses with multiple parts to break, kind of like Hela or that robot Crad, since you can shred them like butter. Her support skill is very good for stunning enemies, and it's very excellent against bosses that are not immune to stun. There are a few bosses that can be stunned. I can't really think of any at the top of my head. Her ultimate is okay. It refreshes the mark duration of her standard skill. For Neuronics, I would definitely try to invest in the standard skill damage. The kitty in the S tier list is known as Shadowcaw Maxar. She's only very useful for her support skill because her support skill basically summons a dummy that your character can hit, and if you hit this dummy, it also damages the enemy. It also boosts your damage if you hit it instead. The only downside to this dummy is you cannot crit using this dummy. However, Maxar's M1 basically negates this because if a sniper character hits this dummy, their crit rate is basically up to 100%. She is very good support for characters that are snipers since, as I said before, at her M1, snipers basically get 100% crit rate. Her support skill is very useful against enemies that move around a lot since you can basically hit the dummy instead of the moving enemy. The dummy is stationary. Honestly, you should only really summon for Maxar Shadowcaw if you're using Yao or any other sniper character as a DPS. Kadia is another DPS character. The meat of her damage is going to be coming from her standard skill. She basically becomes a stationary turret. If you do dodge while in this state, you can automatically reset the cooldown of the skill, so you can basically use the standard skill immediately if you need to move out of the way of an attack. Crossbow characters don't need to reload, so she basically has infinite ammo. If you press the reload button, her shot will change. You can either have a standard shot, which is single target, or an explosive shot for AoE. Her ultimate is whatever, it basically rains down arrows at a small circle. Crossbows cannot crit, but Kadia does so much damage anyways, she doesn't even need to crit, so if you're using her in Labyrinth mode, she's not going to really benefit from crit buffs since they're basically useless for her. Her support skill is also very useful in freezing enemies as well. The latest new 5-star character on Raid Up, Cherno, is a new DPS character. Her playstyle is based around her standard skill. It'll basically summon a black hole that'll give an enemy 30 stacks of this thing called enmity. Enemies basically take damage every second from these stacks, which is basically damage over time. You can summon up to 3 of these black holes and give enemies 90 stacks of enmity. You can also detonate these black holes for nuke damage. Her support skill can launch enemies up in the air and slows them down, which is pretty useful for crowd control. Her ultimate is actually very fucking good. I actually use her ultimate more than any other DPS character, since it applies slow to the enemies and it'll automatically summon 3 black holes if you have no black holes summoned. So you can basically use her ult and detonate these right away for a bunch of stacks. Her ultimate also applies 100 stacks of enemy to these enemies, so they're going to be taking a lot of damage over time from her ultimate. All of her neuronics are very good and very useful. I would definitely recommend starting with her standard skill neuronics first and then move on to her ultimate and then support. Alright, so now let's move on to A tiers, starting with Wild Hunt Life. Pretty standard character. Her damage comes from her standard skill, which basically launches a barrage of missiles that hit enemies. Cooldown is very short, so you can use it rapidly. Her support skill can freeze enemies in AoE, and her ultimate is also AoE that freezes enemies. I think her standard and support neurotics are top priority. Next character in A tier is Marion Swift. Keep in mind that Marion Swift with high investments, so you do need to spend money or time getting her high invested, because at M0 she goes down a tier, B tier, bitch tier, but at M4 she's A tier. M3 basically shortens the cooldown of her standard skill. M4 increases her standard skill damage, and if you pair up with M1 Max R, she will deal even more fucking damage. Her ultimate is very short, it costs 60, doesn't really deal that much damage. Yao kind of outclasses her because Yao just deals a crap ton of damage. Yao can easily work at M0, but Marion needs M4 to even be in A tier, so only use her if you really love Marion Swift to invest in her. Next character we got in A tier is Haru Absconditus. Haru is one of the best mob clearers in the game. You will be spamming her standard skill very often since you can use it pretty frequently, and you can basically use her standard shots to get more chances to use her standard skill. Her skill can also go through walls, so you can deal with hiding enemies, or God forbid your game glitched out and there's some enemy that's like glitched out of bounds and you can't hit them with your standard shots. You can basically use Haru's standard skill to fight those enemies. Her skill can hit up to 5 enemies. Her ultimate also has a very wide range of AoE for mob clearing. Haru will basically enter this thing called the body as blade state, and you'll get 50 victory points, and when you use her ult again, it'll cost her 15 victory points. So she's very good at mob clearing. As I said before, content like the underground shotgun tunnel or the labyrinth mode, she's gonna excel pretty well in those modes since you're basically going to be clearing mobs. But she is kind of weak against like very tanky enemies or boss enemies, like the crab enemies, certain boss enemies. She's not very good against those, but when it comes to mob clearing, she's very good. The pink-haired character in A tier is Frisia Hush. Keep in mind though that you do need to have Frisia Hush very high invested, otherwise she's basically D tier, but with a high invested Frisia Hush, she's A tier. Her M3 basically gives her ult more duration. Her main source of damage can be coming from her ult. With Tess, Frisia Hush can basically spam it. M4 will also increase the damage of her burst. So just like with Marion Swift, don't bother investing in Fuchsia Hush unless you just really love her. Because at low investments, she is D tier, doo-doo tier. Speaking of Tess, Tess is an ultimate support character. She's the only character in the game that can let you use 3 ultimates. So her magic trick is basically supplying your characters with ultimate energy so they can spam their ults as often as possible. Tess ults cost 0, but she'll let other characters rack up ultimate energy. She will also shoot alongside your DPS during the duration of her ult. Her support skill will boost damage on an element that your character shoots, but you do have to unlock this through her neuronics, otherwise she's only going to boost electric damage. Her standard skill shit, don't even bother with it, but for neuronics, just focus on her ultimate and support. I would say that Tess is a must pull since she can boost your character's damage through her support skill. But with her niche of racking up ultimate energy, she's only really useful for characters like Fuchsia Hush or Yao, characters that need their ultimate. Also, the animation of support skill does take too fucking long, but other than that, she's a pretty good support character. Next babe we got on this list is Enya Exuvia, the new 5-star character that you can get for free. She is a support character that will boost your character's standard skill damage. Characters like Cherno, the new 5-star DPS, and Wild Hunt Life. Those 2 characters specifically because for Enya's support skill, she needs 30 stacks to boost the skill damage, and you can only get these stacks from shooting enemies. So Cherno and Life can basically get these stacks very easily since they shoot very fast. Haru is another character that relies on her standard skill damage, but Haru can't shoot very fast compared to Cherno and Life, so it is going to be pretty hard to build stacks with Haru. Xing Ethereal Cloud, on the other hand, most of her damage is coming from ballistic damage anyway. She doesn't really benefit that much from the 5-star Enya. Enya's ult is only very useful for emergency healing. It will basically shove your controlling character into her goon pod, and while in her goon pod, your character will be healed. You cannot do anything while you're in Enya's goon pod, however, her ult is very sexy to look at, so I will use her ult every now and then just to look at her. But anyways, for neuronics, just focus on Enya's support skill. That's it. That's all you really need from Mommy Enya. The last character in A tier, we got Coronet Feni, a simple DPS character. Her standard skill gives her more attack speed and will also boost electric damage. Since Feni Coronet is a shotgun character, she can interrupt most enemies, and she can also break apart enemies' armor pretty easily. Her support skill can raise the rate of fire of her allies. The only downside to Feni is just reloading. Reloading with Feni can take forever, but she does hit like a truck. Her ultimate also gives her some crowd control, and all of her neuronics are pretty useful. Her standard skill, support skill, her ultimate. I would probably suggest you start with her standard skill first if you're intending to use Feni as a main DPS. But if you just want to use Feni as a support, then just focus on her support neuronics first, and there you go. So now we're moving on to the B tier, above average tier. Characters in this tier list are just above average, that's it. First, we're starting off with Marion, Queen of Pain, the 4-star version. The 4-star version basically shares the same tier as her 5-star version if her 5-star version doesn't have high investment, which is kind of sad and rare. Queen of Pain Marion is basically a simple sniper DPS character. I don't know what else to really say about her. If you're really desperate to use Marion, you could use this 4-star version, or maybe you can try to select the 5-star version if you're really that desperate for Marion. Either way, just pair up with Maxar and, just fire away at the dummy. I might as well just talk about Marion Swift since she's basically going to be in this tier if she's not high investment. She basically deals like no damage at M0. She gets better at M3, but that's basically about it. Her standard skill is pretty handy since it does automatically hit enemies from afar, and her support and her burst can knock back enemies. Next up on B tier, we got Acacia Redacted, which is pretty useful for her support skill, which can slow down enemies, and all enemies can be affected by it, especially bosses. She is the only character that can make use of the Navigator Squad logistics other than Cherno, since when you apply slow to the enemies with this logistics set, they will basically receive more damage. If you are a free-to-play player or a light spender, I would definitely recommend you invest in Acacia Redacted. She is the first character you get in the game, and she is pretty relatively useful. Frisia Sunshine is one of those rare characters that's higher than her 5-star variant. Little Sunshine is only really useful for her support skill since she is very good at crowd controlling, and her standard skill can also crowd control as well. That's basically their only use. Fanny Lionheart is a shotgun character that you can get for free. I do think she's probably one of the best 4-star DPS characters that you can get. Shotgun characters are generally pretty good since they can basically knock away enemies' armor. You also don't have to deal with any ricochet damage that other guns have to deal with. Fanny Lionheart is a pretty good investment if you're just starting out. If you do want to replace her with a 5-star DPS that's not Frisia or Marion, you may wish to do so. But if you are free to play or light spender, I definitely recommend that you invest in Fanny Lionheart. Cheng Xing the Observer is basically a heal slot. I only ever used her for healing. That's it. She can deal some damage, more damage than 4-star Yao. But other than that, Cheng Xing Observer is basically just a heal slot. Maxar Meow is a very strange character. Her standard skill can knock back the enemy's soul, and you can literally damage the enemy's soul. Strange, right? The advantage that it gives Maxar is that she doesn't have to deal with ricochet that most submachine guns have to deal with. Her support skill is literally the same shit, but you can only damage that enemy's soul with a skill. So if you pair up with Haru, Cherno, or Wild Hunt Life, they can basically, spam their skills against that soul. Her ultimate is pretty hard to pull off since it does different effects depending on how much your opponent's HP is. If her foe's health is lower than Maxar's, then it'll just deal instant frost damage, but if it's not, she'll basically get a self buff for 10 seconds. I don't know what else to really say about her. Her kit is pretty unique, I'll give it that. She is not free, so you do have to get lucky to get her, but even then, I don't really think she's really worth investing in unless you just really like her. Most of the 4-star characters in B tier or even C tier, they're basically just fodder until you can get their 5-star variants. In the new 1.7 update, you can farm for previous event logistics. So if you don't have a 5-star support, you can just farm the Armana squad and equip them to these characters, because when you use a support skill with this logistics set, it'll basically increase your party's ballistic damage, which is the shooting, the main thing your DPS will do. Anyways, last character in this B tier is Etchel. She is a healer and a buffer. Standard skill can crowd control enemies. Support skill can heal you and can also knock back enemies that are too close to you. Her ult also gives your characters a buff. Her ult costs 40, but if you use her ult at 100, it basically gives your party an even bigger attack buff at 100 ult cost. Overall, she overheals and basically lets you never die. So now that we're done with B tier, let's move on to C tier. These are just your average Joes. They're very average characters. They're going to be pretty difficult to use. Like I said, they're basically just going to be fodder until you get 5-star characters. First character we got on C tier, we got Yao Quiet Quitter. Free heal slot, that's it. Free to play or light spender, I would definitely recommend you build her since she is a free healer. The low cost team that you can use is 4-star Fanny, 4-star Yao, and 4-star Acacia. Since you basically have the DPS in Fanny, Acacia can be a support and Yao can, just heal you away. Whether you're free to play or light spender, I would definitely recommend that team, especially since the new Labyrinth mode does require you to get a clear with just 4-star characters, so you can just use that team and you'll be good. And later on, if you ever do get better 5-star characters, you can just replace them with 5-star characters if you so wish. Next character we got in C tier, we got Life Wednesday, the Wednesday Life, which is basically the poor man's Wild Hunt Life. That's basically it. I don't really have too much words to say about this character. Cirrus the Goldfish, she basically builds a wall that shields you, and that's it. She can be a pretty comfy DPS. She kind of gets outclassed by healers, but I mean, she is pretty gimmicky, but I mean, if you want to use her, you can use her. Cherno, those two. I think her best use is basically her support skill, which can slow down enemies, but you do get Acacia Redacted for free, so You know, it's really gonna be up to you if you want to use Cherno. Cherno is not free as far as I'm aware of, so you have to get lucky to get her. So now that we moved on to the average Joe C tier, we're now going into D tier, the doo-doo tier, the below average tier. These characters are pretty bad, and they will probably require a lot more investments and a lot more work and a lot more skill to use. I might as well just talk about Frisia Hush first, because with low investments, she's basically going to be in this tier. In general, she just sucks. She does no damage. It takes a lot of work to really get her to really get going. She needs tests in order to really do anything, since her main source of damage does come from her ult. I don't remember what her support skill does. I think it's like a shield that shields you, but it's really not that necessary. In fact, her 4-star version is in a higher tier, because at least her 4-star version can crowd control in some way, which is pretty useful. But having a shield is really not really that useful in this game, especially since, you know, you do get a healer for free. I think her standard skill has some form of crowd control, but even then, it's just really not really worth using Frisia Hush unless you just really love her. Nita. She's fun to play in the tactic evaluation mode, since she could basically knock back and crowd control enemies like nobody's business. She can basically cheese in this game mode, since there is a pit in most of these stages. She can basically just knock these enemies into these pits, and, you know, you're basically, you know, cheesing the stage. She is a tank character, but tanks are really not that necessary in this game, because you don't really take that much damage from any enemy that requires you to tank hits, and even then you do have healers that you can use for free, so, you know, you don't really need to tank anything. Overall, she's just very bad. She deals like little to no damage. You can get Fenny for free, and Fenny deals more damage. She is going to be required to use a 5-star weapon in order to really make full use out of her, and I've never really seen her in co-op, and even if I did, I probably don't even remember. I've at least seen Frisia Hush in co-op, but I don't remember ever seeing Anita in co-op. Hopefully she can get a 5-star variant that's just super duper strong. And yeah, big sis. I don't really know what else I can really say about her. Her support skill is really all she has. She attaches a bomb to the enemy, and the next shot that you shoot with that enemy will deal a lot more damage, but her support skill has 15-second cooldown. So even though her support is like one of her best features, it's really also not that good. And now we're moving on to the F tier rank, the worst of the worst, and that's basically going to be Haru the Ace. Even though she has the Ace in her title, she might as well just retitle herself the Ass, because she's really ass in this game. The best part of her kit is her support skill. It'll basically deal more damage to the enemy if the enemy has low health, so the enemy has to be close to death in order for her support skill to really deal any damage. Her ultimate is kind of awkward to use, because basically whenever she uses her ult and she shoots the enemy, there will be like a sword that'll come by and just hit the enemy, but Haru has to hit the enemy. It's not a good idea to invest in Haru the Ass unless you just really like the 4-star Haru, but even then, her 5-star version is just 1,000 infinitely times superior to her 4-star version. And that's basically the tier list that this person has made. I do think it's a pretty good tier list. Now, if I were to make a few changes, however, just a few slight changes, maybe I'd put Fenny in S, since, you know, she's very good. She's a shotgun character. She's very good against hardened Joe. Fuck that boss. And I'd probably put Tess in S2, because her support skills are pretty fucking good. Maybe I'd put Etchel in A. She's pretty comfy to use. Maybe I would move someone down. Who was it? I'll put Marion, you know, I'll put her down just a bit. I'll put where's Hush? I'll put Hush I'll put her in low C. She does have tests, so I guess that can work with her, but you know, I think this is what I'd make the change on the tier list. I think that's it. And yeah, that's basically about it. Let me know what you guys think. What changes would you make on the tier list? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.